Today we are going to look at animals who took brutal revenge on hunters. From a hunter that messed with the wrong lion, to a grizzly bear that hunted down its own hunters. Let's dive straight in.
It was August 14, 2015, and the sun hung heavy over the rolling hills of Limpopo Province, South Africa. The air shimmered with heat waves rising from the red earth, and acacia trees dotted the landscape like ancient sentinels. This was big game country, where the line between hunter and hunted can shift in a heartbeat, and where respect for the wild wasn't just tradition, it was survival. Derek Matheson had flown in from Houston 3 days earlier, his custom rifle case and expensive gear marking him as another wealthy American seeking the ultimate trophy. At 42, Derek was an oil executive who had built his fortune on calculated risks and unwavering confidence. Back home in Texas, he was known for his weekend hunting trips, white-tailed deer, elk, the occasional wild boar. His trophy room was filled with mounted heads and framed photos of successful hunts. But Africa was different. Africa was where real hunters proved themselves. Derek had specifically requested a solo hunt. Group expeditions were for amateurs, he told the outfitter. He wanted to test his skills against dangerous game without the safety net of other hunters or the embarrassment of needing help. His professional hunting guide, the seasoned local named Thabo, had tried to discourage the solo approach, explaining that wounded, dangerous game required teamwork and backup. But Derek's money talked louder than Thabo's experience. The hunting concession sprawled across thousands of acres of pristine bushveld, home to the Big Five and countless other species. Lions in this region were particularly large and aggressive, having learned to avoid humans while maintaining their natural hunting instincts. The terrain was deceptive, open grassland that suddenly gave way to thick brush and rocky outcroppings, where a wounded animal could easily turn the tables on an overconfident hunter. African lions are apex predators weighing up to 420 pounds. Capable of reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. A male lion's bite force exceeds 650 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bone. When wounded, they become exponentially more dangerous, using their intelligence and remaining strength for one final devastating attack. They're known to circle back and ambush their pursuers, turning the hunt into a deadly game of cat and mouse. The morning had started well. Derek and Thabo had tracked a magnificent male lion to a clearing near a dried riverbed. The animal was massive, easily 400 pounds, with a full dark mane that marked him as a dominant male in his prime. Derek took his time, setting up the shot from 150 yards away. His first bullet struck the lion in the shoulder, a solid hit that should have been fatal. The lion roared, stumbled, and disappeared into a thicket of wait-a-bit thorns and dense brush. Thabo immediately called for patience. Standard protocol demanded waiting at least 30 minutes for a wounded, dangerous animal to weaken and die. But Derek was impatient. He'd made a good shot, he insisted. The lion was probably already dead. Against Thabo's strong protests, Derek grabbed his rifle and headed toward the thicket alone, determined to claim his trophy quickly. The brush was thick and visibility was limited to just a few yards in any direction. Derek pushed through the thorns, following drops of blood on the ground and broken branches where the lion had passed. He was focused entirely on the trail ahead, his rifle ready, confidence building with each step. What he didn't realize was that the wounded lion had used its last reserves of strength not to flee, but to circle back. The attack came from behind with explosive force. The lion had been lying in wait, using the thick cover to mask its position. Derek heard a low growl just as 400 pounds of wounded fury slammed into his back, driving him face first into the thorny ground. The lion's claws raked across his shoulders and neck as massive jaws clamped down on the back of his skull. Derek's rifle flew from his hands as he was driven into the dirt. The lion's bite crushed through bone and into brain tissue with devastating force. Derek's body convulsed once, then went limp. The lion held its grip for several more seconds before releasing him and staggering backward, blood from its own wound mixing with Derek's in the dust. The wounded lion managed only a few more steps before collapsing. Derek's bullet had done its job. The animal's lungs were punctured and it was bleeding internally. But it had used its final moments to exact a terrible price from the hunter who had pursued it so recklessly. Thabo found both bodies 20 minutes later. Derek lay motionless in the thorns, his skull crushed and his neck nearly severed by the lion's powerful jaws. The lion had died just yards away, its magnificent mane now matted with blood. The guide immediately radioed for help, but there was nothing anyone could do. An investigation by local authorities ruled the death accidental but preventable. Derek had violated basic hunting safety protocols by pursuing wounded, dangerous game alone. The hunting outfitter faced no charges but quietly updated their policies to require guides to physically restrain clients who attempted similar reckless behavior. Derek's body was flown back to Houston, where his funeral drew hundreds of mourners who remembered him as a successful businessman and devoted father, not as the overconfident hunter who had fatally underestimated his prey. It was November 3rd, 2016, and winter was closing in on Yellowstone National Park. Snow dusted the high peaks while frost painted the meadows silver each morning. The park's famous geysers sent steam columns into the crisp air, and most wildlife was preparing for the harsh months ahead. It was a time when the wilderness felt especially wild, when even experienced outdoorsmen knew to tread carefully. Carl "Bulldog" Morrison had earned his nickname through years of stubborn persistence and a stocky build that made him look like he could bulldoze through any obstacle. At 51, he was an unemployed mechanic from Billings, Montana, whose luck had run out along with his savings. A series of bad decisions and worse investments had left him desperate for money, and he knew the black market value of bear parts could solve his immediate problems. Carl had been poaching illegally in protected areas for months, using his childhood knowledge of Yellowstone's backcountry to avoid rangers and tourists. He preferred working alone. Fewer witnesses, no one to split profits with, and no one to question his increasingly risky decisions. His modified hunting rifle was unregistered, his camping gear was minimal, and his respect for park boundaries was non-existent. Grizzly bears in Yellowstone can weigh over 600 pounds and stand 8 feet tall on their hind legs. As winter approaches, they become increasingly aggressive about defending food sources and den sites. A grizzly's bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, and their claws can grow up to 4 inches long. When protecting their winter territory, they will attack with devastating ferocity, viewing any intruder as a direct threat to their survival. Carl's morning had been successful. He'd managed to kill a smaller black bear near a berry patch, field dressing it quickly and hiding the valuable parts in his backpack. But success bred greed, and Carl decided to push his luck further. He'd been tracking a massive grizzly for over an hour, following claw marks on trees and massive paw prints in the soft earth. The grizzly's den was located in a natural cave beneath a rocky overhang, surrounded by thick brush and fallen logs. Carl approached carefully, his rifle ready, thinking he could catch the bear sleeping or at least off guard. What he didn't realize was that grizzlies are light sleepers, especially when strangers approach their winter sanctuary. The bear detected Carl's scent long before the poacher saw him, as Carl crept through the underbrush trying to get a clear shot at the den entrance. The grizzly was already moving. The massive animal emerged from the cave with surprising speed and silence, positioning itself between the intruder and its winter home. Carl finally spotted the bear when it was less than 30 yards away. He raised his rifle quickly, but the illegal weapon, poorly maintained and modified with cheap parts, misfired. The firing pin struck the primer, but the cartridge failed to ignite. Carl frantically worked the bolt, trying to chamber another round, but the grizzly was already charging. 600 pounds of muscle and fury covered the distance in seconds. The bear's first swipe knocked Carl's rifle from his hand and sent him sprawling backward into the brush. Massive claws raked across his chest, tearing through his jacket and into flesh. Carl screamed and tried to roll away, but the grizzly was on him instantly. The bear's jaws clamped down on Carl's shoulder, crushing bone and muscle with devastating force. Carl's arm went numb as tendons snapped and his shoulder blade cracked. The grizzly shook him like a rag doll before releasing him and striking again with its claws, opening deep gashes across his back and neck. Carl managed one final desperate attempt to crawl away, but the bear wasn't finished. It grabbed him by the leg and dragged him backward toward the den site, treating him like any other threat to its winter survival. The final attack crushed Carl's skull and severed his spinal cord. He died within minutes, his body going limp in the grizzly's jaws. Carl's body wasn't discovered until 3 weeks later, when park rangers conducting a routine patrol noticed his abandoned vehicle at an illegal camping spot. A search team with tracking dogs eventually located his remains, partially consumed and buried under debris the grizzly had constructed. The bear was never located or destroyed. Officials determined it had acted in natural defense of its territory. An investigation revealed Carl's history of wildlife violations and his connection to illegal wildlife trafficking. No charges were filed posthumously, but his death prompted increased patrols in remote areas of the park. Carl's funeral was small and quiet, attended mainly by family members who remembered him as a skilled mechanic who had lost his way. It was July 4th, 2014, and the Okefenokee swamp was alive with the sounds of summer. Cicadas buzzed in the cypress trees, frogs croaked from hidden pools, and somewhere in the distance, an alligator's deep bellow echoed across the dark water. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of decomposing vegetation, while Spanish moss draped from ancient trees like ghostly curtains. Tyler Brennan and his girlfriend Sarah had driven down from Atlanta to celebrate Independence Day with a camping trip in the swamp's remote backcountry. At 19, Tyler was fresh out of high school, full of confidence and eager to prove his manhood to the girl he'd been dating for 6 months. He was athletic, popular, and used to being the center of attention, the kind of young man who took risks to maintain his reputation. Sarah had initially been skeptical about Tyler's boasts of being able to catch an alligator with his bare hands. She'd seen the reality shows where people wrestled gators, but those were trained professionals with safety equipment and backup teams. Tyler had no such experience, just teenage bravado and a desire to impress her with increasingly dangerous stunts. Their campsite was located on a small island of dry ground surrounded by dark water and thick vegetation. The area was known to locals as a prime alligator habitat, especially during summer when females were protecting their nests. American alligators in the Okefenokee can reach lengths of 12 feet and weigh over 500 pounds. Females become extremely aggressive when protecting their nests, which they build in late spring and guard throughout the summer. An alligator's bite force can exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their death roll, a spinning maneuver used to disorient and drown prey, is one of nature's most effective killing techniques. Tyler's confidence had been building all day. He'd successfully caught several smaller animals, a turtle, a snake, even a small fish with his bare hands. Each success made him bolder, and Sarah's initial skepticism had gradually turned to encouragement as she got caught up in the excitement. The couple had been exploring the water's edge when Tyler spotted what he thought was a large log floating about 20 feet from shore. The dark shape was perfectly still, partially submerged, with just the top visible above the waterline. To Tyler's inexperienced eye, it looked like the perfect opportunity to prove his skills. Tyler waded into the murky water, a makeshift noose held high above his head, his eyes fixed on the floating log. The water was warm and dark, with visibility limited to just a few inches below the surface. What Tyler had mistaken for a log was actually a 12-foot female alligator that had been floating motionless near her nest site. Tyler was within 10 feet of the alligator when she exploded from the water. The massive reptile launched herself upward with incredible force, her jaws opening wide to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Tyler had just enough time to register his mistake before 500 pounds of prehistoric fury slammed into his torso. The alligator's jaws clamped down on Tyler's midsection with crushing force, her teeth penetrating deep into his abdomen and back. Tyler screamed as ribs cracked and internal organs compressed under the tremendous pressure. The alligator immediately began her death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining her grip on Tyler's body. As the alligator spun, Tyler's body was twisted and torn, his spine compressed and organs ruptured by the violent motion. The murky water turned red with blood as Tyler was dragged under the surface, his screams cut short by the dark water filling his lungs. The alligator continued her death roll for nearly a minute before releasing Tyler's mangled body and disappearing beneath the surface. An investigation by Georgia wildlife officials ruled Tyler's death an accident caused by reckless behavior in the known dangerous area. No charges were filed, but the incident prompted additional warning signs and increased patrols in popular camping areas. Sarah required counseling to deal with the trauma of witnessing the attack. Tyler's funeral drew hundreds of his high school classmates and teammates, who remembered him as a fun-loving young man whose confidence had ultimately cost him his life. His parents established a scholarship fund in his memory and became advocates for wildlife safety education. February 28, 2017. And the Amazon rainforest of Peru was at its most unforgiving. The wet season had turned every trail into a muddy obstacle course, while the canopy above dripped constantly with moisture that never seemed to dry. Insects swarmed in clouds, and the air was thick with humidity that made every breath feel like drowning. Deep in this green hell, where civilization was just a memory, the law of the jungle reigned supreme. Eduardo Vasquez had been walking these trails for over 30 years, guiding wealthy clients on jaguar hunts that commanded premium prices from collectors around the world. At 58, he was one of the most respected trackers in the region, a man whose knowledge of the rainforest was legendary among locals and the international hunting community. But Eduardo was dying, and he knew it. The cancer diagnosis had come 6 months earlier. Aggressive, inoperable, and terminal. Doctors in Lima had given him less than a year to live, maybe 6 months if he was lucky. Eduardo had accepted the news with the same stoic calm he'd shown throughout his life, but privately he was devastated. He'd spent his entire adult life in the jungle, and the thought of dying in a hospital bed was unbearable. Eduardo had decided on one final hunt, not for money but for pride. He wanted to prove to himself that he could still take down the jungle's apex predator despite his declining health. It would be a solo hunt without clients or assistants, just him against the most dangerous cat in South America. His family had tried to talk him out of it, but Eduardo's mind was made. The area he'd chosen was deep in the Manu National Park region, where jaguars were known to be particularly large and aggressive. The terrain was treacherous even for someone in perfect health. Steep ravines, hidden rivers, and dense vegetation that could hide a predator until it was too late. For a man weakened by cancer and chemotherapy, it was nearly suicidal. Jaguars are the third largest cats in the world, with males weighing up to 250 pounds and possessing the strongest bite force of any big cat, over 1,500 pounds per square inch. They're solitary hunters capable of crushing turtle shells and caiman skulls with ease. Female jaguars with cubs are especially dangerous, defending their young with ferocious determination against any perceived threat. Eduardo had been tracking a large female for 2 days, following paw prints in the mud and claw marks on trees. His illness had slowed him down more than he'd admitted to himself. He tired easily, his hands shook occasionally, and his reflexes weren't what they once were. But his knowledge of jaguar behavior remained sharp, and he'd successfully cornered the cat near a rocky outcropping where she'd made her den. What Eduardo didn't realize was that the female had recently given birth to 2 cubs. The den he'd discovered wasn't just a resting spot, it was a nursery, and the mother jaguar was prepared to die defending her offspring. As Eduardo approached through the dense undergrowth, the jaguar was already positioning herself between the intruder and her babies. Eduardo spotted the jaguar when he was about 40 feet away, crouched low near the entrance to her den. She was magnificent, nearly 6 feet long with the distinctive rosette patterns that marked her as a prime specimen. Eduardo raised his rifle slowly, taking careful aim at her chest. It should have been an easy shot for someone of his experience. But as Eduardo's finger tightened on the trigger, he hesitated. Something in the jaguar's posture, the way she held her ground instead of fleeing, triggered a moment of uncertainty. In that crucial second of hesitation, the jaguar sensed weakness and attacked. The big cat covered the distance in 3 powerful bounds, her muscles rippling beneath her spotted coat. Eduardo's shot went wide as the jaguar slammed into him, her claws raking across his chest and shoulders. The impact knocked him backward into the undergrowth, his rifle flying from his hands and landing several feet away. The jaguar's jaws clamped down on Eduardo's throat with devastating force. Her canine teeth, designed for crushing bone, penetrated deep into his neck, severing arteries and crushing his windpipe. Eduardo's hands clawed weakly at the cat's head, but his strength was already fading as blood loss and oxygen deprivation took their toll. The jaguar held her grip for nearly a minute, ensuring the threat to her cubs was eliminated. Eduardo's struggles grew weaker until his body went completely limp. Only then did the big cat release him and return to her den, where 2 small cubs waited for their mother's protection. Eduardo's body lay motionless in the jungle undergrowth, his blood soaking into the rich earth that had been his home for so many years. The jaguar had killed him quickly and efficiently, using the same techniques that had made her species one of the most successful predators in the Americas. A search party organized by Eduardo's family found his remains 4 days later, guided by GPS coordinates from a satellite communicator. The jaguar and her cubs were long gone, having abandoned the den site after the confrontation. Wildlife officials made no attempt to track or destroy the animal. She had acted according to natural instinct in defending her young. Eduardo's funeral was attended by hundreds of people from across the Amazon basin. Guides, hunters, researchers, and indigenous leaders who had known and respected him. He was buried in his hometown with full honors, remembered as a man who lived and died according to his own terms. The jaguar he'd sought to kill continued to raise her cubs in the deep jungle, unaware that her defensive actions had ended the career of one of Peru's most legendary hunters. It was August 19, 2013, and the waters off Cape Cod were alive with activity. Seals basked on the rocky outcroppings while fishing boats dotted the horizon, their crews working the rich waters that had sustained New England families for generations. But beneath the surface, ancient predators patrolled the depths, drawn by the abundance of prey in the warming summer waters. It was peak season for great white sharks, and experienced fishermen knew to be cautious. Marcus Delacroix had been working these waters his entire life, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him. At 29, he was the older of 2 brothers who ran a small commercial fishing operation out of Provincetown. Marcus had always been the more aggressive and competitive of the 2, constantly pushing boundaries and taking risks that made his younger brother Antoine nervous. The Delacroix family had been fishing in the Cape Cod waters for 4 generations, building a reputation for hard work and seamless teamwork. But Marcus had always felt the need to prove himself as the superior fisherman, often taking unnecessary risks to land bigger catches or venture into more dangerous waters. His rivalry with Antoine was mostly good-natured, but it had intensified recently as both brothers struggled to make their fishing operation profitable. Their boat, a 32-foot commercial fishing vessel named Marie Claire after their grandmother, was well equipped for deep water fishing but not designed for hunting large predators. The brothers had been tracking a massive great white shark for several days, drawn by reports from other fishermen about an 18-foot male that had been seen feeding near the seal colonies. Great white sharks are apex predators that can reach lengths of over 20 feet and weigh more than 5,000 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 4,000 pounds per square inch, and their razor-sharp teeth are designed to tear through flesh and bone with devastating efficiency. They're ambush predators that attack from below, using their incredible speed and power to deliver fatal strikes to unsuspecting prey. Marcus had convinced Antoine to anchor near a seal colony where great whites were known to hunt, despite his brother's protests about the danger. The area was notorious among local fishermen as a place where sharks gathered during feeding times, making it extremely hazardous for anyone foolish enough to enter the water. The massive shark had been circling their boat for over an hour, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface as it investigated the unusual presence in its hunting grounds. Marcus became increasingly excited as he watched the predator, seeing an opportunity to prove his superiority over Antoine once and for all. Against all common sense and maritime safety protocols, Marcus decided to enter the water with a harpoon. Antoine argued desperately with his brother, pointing out that their father would never have attempted such a reckless stunt. But Marcus was determined to prove that he was the better fisherman, the braver brother, the one who deserved to lead their family business. He donned his wetsuit and grabbed a heavy harpoon, ignoring Antoine's increasingly frantic protests. The water was clear but deceptively calm as Marcus slipped over the side of the boat. He could see the shark's massive form moving in the depths below, its powerful tail propelling it through the water with effortless grace. Marcus positioned himself near the surface, harpoon ready, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The great white approached from directly below, using the sun's glare on the surface to mask its approach. Marcus never saw the attack coming. The shark's massive head broke the surface with explosive force, its jaws opening wide to reveal rows of triangular teeth. The first bite caught Marcus across the torso, the shark's teeth slicing through his wetsuit and into the flesh with surgical precision. Marcus screamed as the shark's jaws clamped down on his midsection, crushing ribs and puncturing organs with devastating force. His harpoon struck the shark's head but failed to penetrate deeply enough to cause serious damage. The wounded predator released him momentarily, blood from both hunter and prey mixing in the churning water. Antoine screamed from the boat, frantically trying to start the engine and maneuver closer to his brother, but the great white wasn't finished. The shark's predatory instincts had been fully triggered by the blood in the water and the struggling movements of its prey. It circled once and attacked again, this time with lethal precision. The second attack was devastating. The shark's jaws closed around Marcus's upper body, its teeth severing his arm and crushing his chest cavity. The force of the bite lifted Marcus partially out of the water before the shark pulled him under, beginning the violent shaking motion that great whites use to tear apart large prey. Marcus's body went limp as massive blood loss and trauma overwhelmed his system. The shark continued its attack for several more seconds before releasing what remained and disappearing into the depths. Antoine watched in horror as pieces of his brother's wetsuit and equipment floated to the surface, along with an expanding pool of blood that attracted other scavengers. Coast Guard rescue boats arrived within 30 minutes of Antoine's distress call, but there was nothing left to recover except fragments of Marcus's gear and his life jacket. The great white shark was never located. having returned to the depths to continue its ancient cycle of predation. An investigation by maritime authorities ruled Marcus's death an accident caused by reckless behavior in known shark-infested waters. No charges were filed, but the incident prompted increased safety warnings for fishermen working near seal colonies during shark season. Antoine continued operating the family fishing business alone, but he never again ventured into the waters where his brother had died. Marcus's funeral was attended by hundreds of fishermen and community members who remembered him as a skilled waterman whose competitive nature had ultimately cost him his life. The Delacroix family fishing operation continued under Antoine's leadership, but the rivalry that had driven Marcus to take such a fatal risk died with him in the waters off Cape Cod.
It was October 15th, 2016, when two hunters ventured into the remote wilderness of Kodiak Island, Alaska. The rugged terrain stretched endlessly with dense alder thickets and towering Sitka spruce trees, creating a maze of natural corridors. Autumn fog rolled across the mountainous landscape, reducing visibility to mere yards in some areas. The island's vast wilderness supported one of the highest densities of brown bears on Earth, making it a place where humans were merely visitors in a realm ruled by massive carnivores. Felix Williams, a 34-year-old construction foreman from Montana, had dreamed of this hunt for 3 years, saving every spare dollar for the expensive guided expedition. Known for his aggressive hunting style and overconfidence, Felix specialized in archery hunts and had insisted on bow hunting despite rifles being available, confident his skill would compensate for the risks. His reputation for pushing boundaries had earned him both respect and concern among fellow hunters. His companion, Wes Graham, was a 29-year-old accountant from Colorado who had limited big game experience but considerable financial resources. Wes had invested heavily in premium hunting equipment, hoping to impress his more experienced friend on what would be his first dangerous game hunt. The duo had hired a seasoned local guide who warned them repeatedly about a particular massive male bear that had been terrorizing the area. This legendary bear had charged other hunters twice before, displaying unusual aggression even for Kodiak standards. The guide emphasized patience and precision, stressing that wounded bears became extremely dangerous and often doubled back to attack their pursuers. Felix dismissed these warnings with characteristic arrogance, convinced his bow hunting skills would ensure a clean kill. Kodiak brown bears are among the largest predators on Earth, with adult males reaching weights exceeding 1,200 pounds. These animals possess incredible strength, with claws commonly measuring up to 4 inches in length and a crushing bite force. Kodiak bears can sprint at 35 miles per hour through dense vegetation and possess an acute sense of smell that can detect scents from miles away. Their thick hide and dense muscle mass make them incredibly difficult to kill, requiring precise shot placement to vital organs. When wounded, they become particularly aggressive, often circling back to ambush their attackers rather than fleeing. The fatal mistake occurred when Felix spotted the massive bear at 60 yards through a clearing and took a hasty shot without proper preparation. His broadhead arrow struck the bear's shoulder blade instead of penetrating the vital chest cavity behind the front leg. The wounded animal let out a thunderous roar that echoed across the valley before crashing through the brush, leaving a clear blood trail on fallen leaves and broken branches. When Felix moved to follow, the guide refused, warning that pursuing a wounded Kodiak bear on foot violated his safety protocols and the terms of the hunt. Despite being told he would abandon the expedition if they continued, both men chose to pursue the wounded bear alone into the alder thickets. The bear had circled back using game trails and positioned itself just 15 yards ahead in the dense vegetation, waiting in ambush. When Felix and Wes entered the thicket following the blood trail, the massive predator exploded from concealment at full speed. In under 2 seconds, it covered the distance with terrifying efficiency. Felix managed to release one more arrow that struck the bear's chest. The massive frame slammed into Felix with devastating force, razor-sharp claws raking across his torso. 4-inch claws tore through his heavy hunting jacket and ribcage, puncturing both lungs instantly and causing massive internal hemorrhaging. The bear's jaws clamped down on Felix's head and neck with crushing pressure, causing catastrophic cranial and cervical trauma. Wes reached desperately for the large-caliber rifle the guide had left with them against his better judgment, but the bear pivoted toward him before he could shoulder it. A powerful swipe caught Wes across the upper thigh, the claws opening the femoral region and causing severe vascular damage. As Wes fell backward onto the forest floor, the bear continued slashing his chest and forearms for nearly a minute while he attempted to bring his rifle up. Felix died within minutes from massive head trauma and chest injuries. Wes survived the brutal mauling but succumbed rapidly to blood loss from the severed femoral vessels. The bear remained in the vicinity for an extended period before finally departing the scene. Alaska State Troopers launched a comprehensive investigation into the incident, ultimately ruling it a hunting accident caused by pursuing a wounded dangerous animal without following established safety protocols. The men's families struggled with the devastating loss, particularly given that the attack could have been prevented by following basic hunting safety guidelines. The incident highlighted the extreme risks associated with bow hunting large predators in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness, and sparked renewed discussions about hunting regulations in bear country. It was September 22, 2017, when a marine biology graduate student prepared for what would become her final dive near the protected boundary waters of the Farallon Islands off California's coast. The waters surrounding this rocky archipelago were known for their treacherous conditions, with powerful currents, frigid temperatures, and limited visibility creating a challenging environment for even experienced divers. Dense fog banks rolled across the Pacific, reducing surface visibility to less than 100 yards. The area's nutrient-rich waters supported massive populations of marine life, including elephant seals whose rookeries dotted the nearby islands. These conditions that made the region a biological hotspot also attracted some of the ocean's most dangerous predators. Rosalinda Kane, a 31-year-old marine biology graduate student at UC Davis, had spent years studying shark behavior and was considered an expert free diver and spear fisherwoman. Her dissertation focused on white shark feeding patterns, and she had logged hundreds of hours in California's coastal waters. Known for pushing diving limits in dangerous locations, Rosalinda was confident in her ability to read shark behavior and avoid dangerous encounters. Her academic advisor had repeatedly warned against solo diving, especially during peak white shark season, but research deadlines and limited funding had forced her to work alone. On this particular morning, Rosalinda conducted an unsanctioned solo dive outside her approved research window, a decision she knew violated both university safety protocols and local access restrictions. She entered the waters near the restricted Farallon Islands area, targeting lingcod populations at depths of approximately 60 feet. Local charter boat captains had reported increased white shark activity in recent weeks, with multiple sightings near nearby seal colonies. The timing coincided with peak feeding season, when adult white sharks congregated in the area to hunt marine mammals. Despite these escalating warnings, Rosalinda proceeded with the dive, driven by mounting pressure to complete her research. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable apex predators, with adult females reaching lengths of 18 feet or more. These massive predators possess rows of serrated teeth, designed for cutting through flesh and bone, combined with incredible bite force capable of crushing large prey. Great whites are ambush hunters, using their powerful tails to propel themselves at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour when attacking from below. Their acute senses allow them to detect electrical fields generated by struggling fish and the scent of blood from vast distances. During feeding season near seal colonies, these sharks become particularly aggressive and territorial. The fatal mistake occurred when Rosalinda successfully speared a 40-pound lingcod at 50 feet depth near a rocky outcropping. The wounded fish thrashed violently on her spear tip, creating both a blood trail and electrical distress signals that traveled through the water column. Instead of immediately surfacing with her catch, she remained at depth to secure the fish properly, unaware that these signals had attracted a large female white shark. The 18-foot female approached from below and behind, using the sun's angle and water clarity to mask her approach until she was within striking distance. Rosalinda spotted the shark's massive silhouette when it was approximately 20 feet away and ascending rapidly. She attempted an emergency ascent, dropping her spear and swimming toward the surface, but the shark accelerated to intercept her escape route. The shark's jaws opened to their full 4-foot width, revealing multiple rows of triangular serrated teeth as it struck Rosalinda's left leg and hip region. The initial bite delivered crushing force that immediately severed the femoral artery and shattered her hip bone. The shark's teeth tore through her wetsuit and deep into muscle and bone. The attack lasted approximately 8 seconds before the shark released its grip. Rosalinda was pulled down nearly 15 feet during the initial attack, with massive blood loss beginning immediately from the severed artery. After releasing her, the shark circled back more slowly, displaying investigative behavior rather than an immediate strike. Moments later, it delivered a second, far less controlled attack that struck her torso instead of releasing, its jaws penetrating her chest cavity and puncturing vital organs, including her lung and heart. The catastrophic trauma created an even larger blood trail in the water, further escalating the shark's predatory behavior. The combination of catastrophic blood loss, organ damage, and water inhalation led to rapid incapacitation. Rosalinda lost consciousness within 90 seconds of the initial attack. Death occurred from exsanguination and drowning at a 45-foot depth, her body sinking toward the rocky bottom, where it remained until recovery crews located her several hours later. The Coast Guard discovered her remains 6 hours after she failed to return to shore, with her dive boat found anchored and empty. The recovery revealed extensive shark damage, with her left leg severed below the knee and massive trauma to her torso. The incident prompted investigations by university officials and marine safety authorities, who criticized the decision to dive alone in known shark habitat during peak season. Rosalinda's family struggled to understand how an experienced researcher could have made such a fatal error in judgment. The incident led to stricter safety protocols for graduate student research. It was August 12, 2015, when a Seattle family arrived at a remote backcountry campsite in Glacier National Park, Montana. The pristine wilderness stretched for miles in every direction, with towering peaks, dense forests, and crystal-clear streams creating a picture-perfect setting for outdoor recreation. However, this seemingly peaceful environment was home to one of North America's most dangerous predators. The park's 1,500 grizzly bears roamed freely through the ecosystem, and late summer marked peak feeding season as the massive carnivores prepared for winter hibernation. Imogen Scott, a 42-year-old nurse from Seattle, had planned this backcountry camping trip as a way to reconnect with her children following a difficult divorce. An experienced camper but new to grizzly country, Imogen was determined to prove her self-sufficiency and create positive memories for her family. Her children, Emma, 16, and Lucas, 14, had limited wilderness experience and relied entirely on their mother's guidance for safety protocols. The family had secured a permitted backcountry campsite located a full day's hike from the nearest trailhead, well beyond regular ranger patrols. Park rangers had posted extensive bear safety information at trailheads, emphasizing proper food storage and campsite management. Warning signs detailed the consequences of attracting bears to campsites, noting that food-conditioned bears often became aggressive and dangerous. Despite receiving this information, the Scott family failed to follow critical bear safety protocols. They left their cooler unsecured outside their tent overnight and stored scented toiletries inside their sleeping area, both violations of park regulations. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. These massive omnivores can sprint at 35 miles per hour and have an acute sense of smell that can detect food odors from miles away. During late summer, grizzlies enter hyperphagia, consuming up to 20,000 calories daily to build fat reserves for winter. This makes them extremely aggressive when defending food sources, and they will attack anything perceived as competition or a threat to their meal. The fatal mistake occurred when the family left their cooler containing food scraps outside their tent throughout the night. The scented toiletries stored inside created additional attractants. At approximately 5 a.m., a large male grizzly discovered the unsecured cooler and began feeding on its contents just 30 feet from the family's tent. Imogen was awakened by sounds of the bear rummaging through their supplies and made the critical error of leaving the tent to investigate. She stepped outside wearing only pajamas and a headlamp, immediately finding herself at close range with a 650-pound grizzly that was actively feeding. The bear raised its massive head and identified her as a potential threat to its food source, triggering an immediate defensive response. The grizzly launched into an explosive charge, covering the distance in less than 3 seconds. Imogen turned to run back toward the tent, but this movement triggered the bear's chase instinct and escalated the encounter. The bear's massive frame struck her from behind, knocking her forward onto the rocky ground with tremendous force. The impact caused severe trauma, but the bear immediately began inflicting additional damage with its claws and teeth. Razor-sharp claws raked down her back and flank, creating deep lacerations that severed muscle tissue and caused multiple fractures to her ribs and spine. The bear's weight pressed down on her body as it continued the assault. The grizzly's jaws clamped down on Imogen's neck and shoulder region, delivering a crushing bite force that caused catastrophic damage to vital structures. The attack severed major blood vessels in her neck while simultaneously crushing vertebrae and damaging her airway. Her screams echoed through the campsite, waking Emma and Lucas inside the tent, but the children remained hidden. The mauling lasted less than 30 seconds but caused catastrophic injuries. The combination of massive blood loss from severed arteries, spinal trauma, and airway damage proved fatal within minutes. Death resulted from vascular injury and neck trauma. After killing Imogen, the grizzly remained in the area for several hours, continuing to feed on scattered food supplies. Emma and Lucas remained inside their tent until full daylight, then carefully exited and hiked 6 miles to the nearest ranger station to report the attack. Park Service investigators ruled it a preventable tragedy caused by improper food storage and failure to follow bear safety protocols. The investigation revealed multiple violations that directly contributed to attracting the bear. Imogen's family struggled with grief compounded by the knowledge that basic safety measures could have prevented the attack. The incident sparked renewed discussions about bear safety education in national parks. Officials emphasized that human-bear conflicts were almost always the result of human error rather than aggressive bear behavior. It was June 18, 2018, when a group of American business executives arrived at a private hunting concession in the Greater Kruger area of South Africa. The vast savanna stretched endlessly under the scorching African sun, with scattered acacia trees and dense mopane woodlands creating a patchwork of hunting terrain. This was the heart of big game country, where some of Africa's most dangerous predators roamed freely across thousands of acres of pristine wilderness. The dry season had concentrated wildlife around remaining water sources, making animal encounters more frequent and potentially dangerous. Daphne Thorne, a 38-year-old investment banker from New York, had organized this expensive hunting expedition as a corporate retreat designed to impress her business associates. Despite her wealth and confidence, Daphne had limited big game hunting experience, having previously hunted only white-tailed deer and small game. She had specifically requested a lion hunt for her trophy room, viewing it as the ultimate symbol of success. Her 2 business partners had similarly limited dangerous game experience, but considerable financial resources. The group had hired a professional hunter with decades of experience in African big game hunting. During their initial briefing, he warned them extensively about lion pride dynamics and the extreme dangers of tracking wounded cats into thick cover. He emphasized the importance of precise shot placement and maintaining proper formation during tracking situations. The professional hunter had also mentioned unusual lion behavior in the area. African lions are among the continent's most formidable apex predators, with adult females weighing up to 280 pounds and possessing incredible speed, strength, and hunting intelligence. These social cats hunt in coordinated groups, using sophisticated ambush tactics evolved over millions of years. Lions can sprint at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour and possess razor-sharp claws capable of inflicting devastating wounds. Their powerful jaws deliver a crushing bite force that can sever major arteries. When wounded, lions become extremely aggressive and coordinate attacks using pack hunting strategies. The fatal mistake occurred on the 3rd day when Daphne spotted what appeared to be a large male lion through dense mopane brush at approximately 80 yards. Eager to secure her trophy, she took a rushed shot without properly identifying her target. Her bullet struck a lioness instead of the intended male, wounding but not killing the animal. The wounded lioness immediately disappeared into thick woodland. Against the professional hunter's explicit advice to wait, Daphne insisted on immediately pursuing the blood trail. The group entered the dense mopane woodland without maintaining proper formation. Despite the professional hunter taking the lead, Daphne remained dangerously close and repeatedly stepped out of position, trying to maintain visual contact with the blood trail. This critical error placed them in extreme danger as they moved through terrain that heavily favored the wounded predator. The wounded lioness had rejoined at least 2 other pride members that remained concealed nearby. As the hunting party advanced following the intermittent blood trail, they unknowingly walked directly into the coordinated trap. The lions had used their superior knowledge of terrain to surround the humans, while remaining completely concealed. The attack began when the wounded lioness charged from the left flank at close range, targeting Daphne as the source of her injury. The 280-pound predator struck Daphne at full sprint, knocking her 8 feet backward and sending her rifle flying beyond reach. The lioness's powerful jaws immediately clamped down on Daphne's throat and upper neck region, delivering crushing pressure that severed the carotid artery and crushed her trachea. Within seconds, a second lioness joined the attack, raking razor-sharp claws across Daphne's abdomen and chest. The 4-inch claws opened massive wounds that penetrated deep into her torso, causing catastrophic internal damage and massive blood loss. Daphne's screams were cut short as the throat bite prevented vocalization and rapidly compromised her airway. The coordinated attack continued for nearly a minute as both lionesses focused their assault on Daphne's vital areas. The professional hunter fired multiple shots, successfully killing the primary attacking lioness and forcing the second to retreat. However, the damage had already been done. Daphne had suffered massive throat trauma that severed major blood vessels and completely destroyed her airway. Death occurred within 6 minutes from the combination of massive blood loss and asphyxiation. The remaining pride members retreated deeper into the woodland after the professional hunter's intervention. South African authorities launched an investigation into the incident, ultimately ruling it a hunting accident caused by failure to follow established dangerous game protocols. Daphne's family struggled with the loss, particularly given that the tragedy could have been prevented by following basic hunting safety guidelines. The incident sparked discussions within the professional hunting community about client education and safety enforcement. It was September 14, 2016, when an experienced alligator hunter ventured deep into Louisiana's Atchafalaya Basin, one of America's largest and most dangerous swamplands. The vast wetland ecosystem stretched for miles in every direction, with towering bald cypress trees draped in Spanish moss, creating a cathedral-like canopy over the dark, tannic waters. Narrow channels wound through dense vegetation, creating a maze of waterways where visibility was limited and danger lurked beneath the surface. Spring breeding season had arrived, making the basin's massive alligator population more aggressive and territorial. Byron Vance, a 35-year-old oil rig worker from Louisiana, represented the 3rd generation of his family to hunt alligators in these treacherous waters. With 15 years of experience navigating the swamp's hidden dangers, Byron was known for his willingness to pursue trophy-sized gators that other hunters avoided. His reputation for taking dangerous risks had earned him both respect and concern among fellow hunters. Byron preferred hunting alone to maximize profits from valuable hides. For 3 weeks, Byron had been tracking a legendary 14-foot male alligator that had eluded capture by multiple hunters over several seasons. Local hunters had warned him repeatedly about this particular animal's unusual size and aggressive behavior, noting that previous attempts to harvest it had resulted in close calls. The massive reptile had earned a fearsome reputation for attacking boats and displaying territorial behavior far beyond normal patterns. Despite these warnings, Byron remained determined to claim this ultimate trophy. American alligators are among North America's most formidable aquatic predators, with large males reaching lengths exceeding 14 feet and weights approaching 1,000 pounds. These ancient reptiles possess incredible bite force and lightning-fast reflexes. Alligators are perfectly adapted for their aquatic environment, capable of explosive bursts of speed both in water and on land. Their powerful tails serve as both propulsion and weapons, while their massive jaws contain rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping and crushing prey. During breeding season, male alligators become extremely territorial and aggressive. The fatal mistake occurred when Byron spotted the massive 14-foot male basking in shallow water near cypress roots. Instead of using proper baiting techniques, he decided to approach the animal directly in 3-foot deep water. Byron fired a single .22 caliber shot aimed at the alligator's head, but the bullet struck at an angle and failed to penetrate the thick skull bone. The wounded alligator immediately slid off the muddy bank into the murky water and disappeared beneath the surface. Against all safety protocols, Byron waded 20 feet into the swamp to search for the injured animal. The dark water made visibility virtually impossible, while submerged logs created numerous hiding spots for the wounded predator. Byron moved slowly through the chest-deep water, unaware that the alligator had positioned itself directly beneath him. The 800-pound alligator erupted from the water with explosive force, launching its massive body upward at incredible speed. The surprise attack caught Byron completely off guard, as the predator's jaws clamped around his upper thigh with crushing force. The initial bite immediately severed the femoral artery and shattered the femur bone, causing massive trauma and instant blood loss. The alligator immediately initiated its signature death roll, spinning violently in the water while maintaining its grip on Byron's leg. The powerful rotation continued for 45 seconds, dislocating his hip and shoulder joints, while causing additional fractures. Byron was pulled underwater repeatedly during the spinning motion, forcing him to inhale swamp water. The alligator's grip shifted to Byron's torso, with its massive jaws crushing 3 ribs and puncturing his lung. The reptile's powerful tail repeatedly slapped Byron's body, causing severe blunt force trauma. Each impact drove him deeper underwater, making breathing impossible and accelerating his drowning. The attack continued for over 3 minutes. Death resulted from the combination of massive blood loss from the severed femoral artery, drowning from repeated submersion, and catastrophic internal injuries from the crushing bite force and death roll trauma. Following typical behavior, the massive reptile cached Byron's body underwater beneath a fallen cypress log. The animal remained in the area for several days, defending its kill from scavengers. Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries launched a search operation when Byron failed to return. Search teams discovered his abandoned boat within 24 hours after he failed to check in, leading to the recovery of his remains lodged beneath the cypress log. The condition of the body confirmed death by alligator attack. The incident prompted discussions about alligator hunting safety protocols. Byron's family struggled with the loss, particularly given his extensive experience. Wildlife officials emphasized that alligator attacks remained extremely rare, but noted that pursuing wounded animals dramatically increased risk.
October 3, 2011 began in the muted blue haze of pre-dawn over the Carpathian Mountains, not far from the outskirts of Brasov, Romania. The forested ridgelines, steep and tangled with fir, spruce, and moss-covered underbrush, were steeped in a silence broken only by the crack of twigs beneath boots and the distant caw of crows. In these remote valleys, the mist settles thick along the forest floor, muting colors and sound alike. It was a place where predators had the advantage, where humans felt like visitors even with rifles in hand. Claudiu Fenech moved with quiet purpose along a narrow game trail, his breath visible in the early chill. At 39, he was seasoned, not just as a hunter, but as a man who understood the rhythms of the wild. Stocky and deliberate, he worked as a game warden part-time, but was better known in town for his mechanical skills and calm under pressure. He'd grown up around hunting rifles and long weekends in the forest. Married once, no children, he now spent most of his free time hiking or stalking boar, sharing local schnapps with friends, or keeping an old Land Rover running past its prime. Everyone knew Claudiu would say the same. He wasn't reckless, but he was confident. Maybe too confident for the woods that day. The trio had left before first light, Claudio and 2 of his longtime friends, each armed and familiar with the region. They had been called in to track a nuisance bear, a large male spotted multiple times near rural properties, raiding apiaries and tearing through compost bins. With hunting permits secured and reports growing more urgent, the men moved slowly along a slope known to be part of the bear's range. Claudiu carried a Blazer R8 bolt-action rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, a powerful round more than capable of dropping large game from 150 yards. He'd used it many times before. He trusted it. The Eurasian brown bear is no minor threat. Among the largest terrestrial carnivores in Europe, adult males regularly exceed 900 pounds and can stand over 8 feet tall on their hind legs. They possess immense strength, enough to flip boulders, tear apart tree trunks, or run bursts of up to 30 miles per hour across uneven terrain. Their claws are over 3 inches long, and their jaws, while not as crushing as a big cat's, are designed to tear, puncture, and maul. Though attacks are rare, a wounded bear is one of the most dangerous animals in the world, driven not by hunger, but by pain and rage. It was just past 7 a.m. when Claudiu spotted the bear through a break in the trees about 130 yards away, downhill, partially obscured by brush. The animal was large, slow-moving, its coat dark and thick with burrs clinging to its flanks. Claudiu crouched low and steadied his rifle. The first shot rang out and echoed through the mountains. The bear staggered, spun once, and collapsed into the thicket. After waiting 2 full minutes with no movement, Claudiu gestured to his friends and advanced cautiously. He kept the rifle shouldered but relaxed, walking the line between vigilance and assumed success. The underbrush at the kill site was thick. Moist earth clung to his boots as he stepped over a branch and spotted the bear lying on its side, chest barely visible through the tangle of leaves and ferns. Claudiu raised the rifle again, but in that split second, the bear moved. It rose fast, too fast, snarling through blood and broken breath, dragging itself upright with a fury that seemed impossible from something so close to death. Claudiu barely had time to react. One swipe caught his forearm, knocking the rifle from his hands and sending it clattering into the rocks. Another paw slammed across his chest, tearing through his jacket and carving deep gashes into flesh and bone. He cried out and stumbled backward, boots slipping on wet soil. He may have tried to run, but there was no time. The bear lunged, clamping its jaws around his torso and yanking him off his feet in one brutal motion. It dragged him several yards into the brush and pinned him beneath its weight, crushing down as it mauled him in a blur of claws and teeth. Claudiu thrashed, tried to fight, but the strength was already leaving his limbs. His friends, frozen at first, heard everything. The thudding impact, the ragged cries, the sickening snap of bone. By the time they reached him, the bear had collapsed just feet away, bleeding out, twitching, and still baring its teeth in a final reflexive snarl. A second shot was fired, but it was clear the animal had already bled out. Claudiu lay curled on his side, blood soaking through his jacket, his rifle lying 6 feet away with fresh claw marks carved across the stock and dirt scuffed in a half circle around the site. Deep gashes ran across his upper chest and abdomen, and his ribs had caved inward from the crush. One leg was mangled at the hip, a boot partially torn. His face was pale, mouth slightly open as if still trying to call out. His death, according to the coroner's report later, had been caused by massive internal trauma and blood loss. He had died within 90 seconds. The bear had managed to crawl another 35 feet before it collapsed and died, a trail of blood and broken branches marking its final moments. The site was cordoned off by forest authorities and examined in detail. Investigators found signs of movement in the underbrush before the attack, suggesting the bear had not died instantly but had instead lain silent, concealed until Claudiu came too close. The first shot had struck just behind the shoulder but missed the heart. A lethal shot in minutes, not seconds. And minutes in this case were far too long. Romanian authorities classified the death as a fatal wildlife incident. The bear's carcass was recovered where it had collapsed a short distance from the scene. and forestry officials documented the site before clearing the area. No additional hunts were authorized in that section of the forest for the rest of the season. Claudiu's family held a closed casket service in Brazov, attended by friends, fellow hunters, and local forestry officials. His rifle, marked with claw scratches and caked with dirt, was eventually returned to his family. Claudiu's death served as a grim reminder to even seasoned hunters: never assume a downed predator is finished. Brown bears can weigh over 800 pounds and still find the strength to charge, even after a critical shot. In the wild, one misjudgment, one step too soon can be all it takes to turn a successful hunt into a fatal mistake. August 26, 2024 began with a dry breeze curling through the Loliondo game-controlled area, just east of the Serengeti. The ground was brittle, grass burned gold by the late summer sun, and the tracks of zebra and lion pressed deep into the dust like scars. This was hunting country, legal, remote, and unforgiving. At sunrise, Malcolm Draycott stood at the front of the lead truck, scanning the plains as the convoy pushed forward. Everything felt in place, but in the bush, comfort is a warning, because the moment things seem safest is when they're about to go wrong. Malcolm was 44, a self-made man with a quiet intensity. He'd grown up outside Houston, the son of a machinist and a school secretary, and worked his way through oil rigs and construction crews until he built a company of his own. He sold it at 38 and walked away with more money than he could ever spend, then vanished from boardrooms and golf courses entirely. What came next was something he called earning a different kind of respect. He trained with professional guides, learned to track and shoot, and began traveling across southern Africa. His name was known in certain circles, not flashy, not loud, but remembered. He tipped well, followed rules, and didn't flinch when things got messy. Outfitters liked him, trackers trusted him, but underneath the calm was something harder. Malcolm didn't like leaving things undone. And when he set his sights on a lion, it wasn't about thrill, it was about completion. He treated the hunt like a business plan. Every angle covered, every risk accounted for. What he couldn't plan for was the lion he didn't see. By mid-morning, a young male lion was spotted resting in the open near a cluster of stones, his body stretched in the grass, mane tinged with shadow and age. Through his Leopold VX 3i scope, Malcolm steadied his .375 H&H Magnum, drew in a slow breath, and fired. The crack of the shot startled a flock of birds into the air. The lion didn't flinch. He dropped immediately, a clean fall into the brush. The men nodded to each other. It looked perfect. But the savannah doesn't always give you what you see. Sometimes it gives you what you've forgotten to fear. They didn't know it yet, but the lion on the ground wasn't the alpha. It was a younger male, possibly subordinate, possibly trailing the real pride leader. And 40 feet away, obscured by waist-high grass and wind direction, the dominant male had been watching. Malcolm stepped from the vehicle with his rifle at his side and a practiced ease in his walk. He moved slowly, savoring the moment, and stopped just beside the lion's body to nudge the mane with his boot. The guides moved to set up the camera. A few paces back, the trackers stayed alert, though the kill looked routine. Malcolm crouched low to inspect the shot placement, muttering something under his breath, and reached forward to lift the lion's heavy head for a photograph. That's when the second lion struck. There was no growl, no sound at all, just a rush of motion as the hidden alpha burst from the grass at full speed. It hit Malcolm sideways, a blur of fur and muscle slamming into him like a battering ram. The force knocked him completely off his feet. His rifle flew from his grip and clattered against a nearby rock. The lion's jaws closed around Malcolm's neck and shoulder as it dragged him backwards through the dust, shaking him once, then again with terrifying force. His body jerked violently, boots scraping the ground, arms flailing in a brief, stunned attempt to fight back. The guides froze in shock for a heartbeat before scrambling for their rifles. One fired too quickly, the bullet kicking up dust behind the lion's flank. A second round found its mark, grazing the animal's ribcage. The lion didn't let go. It planted one massive paw across Malcolm's chest and drove its teeth deeper, crushing vertebrae and artery alike. Blood sprayed across the grass in dark arcs as Malcolm's body convulsed once, then went slack. A third shot rang out, this time punching through the lion's side. It staggered, snarled, and finally released its grip. The animal collapsed nearby, muscles twitching, blood seeping into the soil as it died facing the body of the man it had just killed. The aftermath was sudden and grim. The trackers, still shaken from the gunfire, scrambled forward and found Malcolm's body sprawled near the carcass of the first lion. His torso was torn open, neck punctured deep, and blood soaked through his shirt into the dust below. His eyes were still open, glazed in shock. His right hand, outstretched toward where the rifle had landed, remained curled as if trying to reach for it even in his last breath. There was no triumphant photo, no moment of pride, only chaos. One of the guides radioed for emergency evacuation, though it was more for protocol than hope. The closest ranger outpost was nearly an hour away, and no one doubted what the outcome would be. They wrapped his remains in a canvas tarp and laid him gently in the bed of the truck. The other lion, the one that had attacked, had already collapsed a few yards away, shot through the ribs by one of the clients, still trembling with disbelief. Malcolm's death was ruled a fatal wildlife incident. Local authorities confirmed the hunt had been legal with all permits intact. No charges were filed, but the hunting company quietly revised its protocols. No more photo ops until the scene was cleared, no more assumptions about lone predators. The party returned to camp in silence and no further hunts were conducted in that zone for the rest of the season. His remains were flown back to Texas and buried in a private ceremony, attended only by family and a handful of close hunting companions. The story never made headlines, but it didn't have to. Among professional guides and bush veterans, word spread fast. Not as gossip, but as a warning. The lion he shot had never been the threat. The real danger had waited, hidden in the grass, close enough to strike the moment the barrel dipped and the cameras came out. Malcolm had done everything right until the second he assumed he was alone. September 16, 2022 dawned cold and crisp in Montana's Gallatin National Forest, where mist clung to the understory and the sharp scent of pine hung in the air like a warning. Elk rutting season was in full swing, and bugles echoed faintly through the ridges, low and urgent. Gallatin, part of the vast Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, is home to some of the most rugged terrain in the American West. Forest of lodgepole pine and Engelmann spruce laced with game trails and shaded hollows perfect for an ambush. Travis Longmore, 28 years old, knew the area well. He had hunted these woods before, but that day, in a stretch of unmarked timber above a shallow creek bed, something would go terribly wrong. Travis wasn't reckless. Raised in Idaho and based in Bozeman, he worked hard during the week and hunted hard when he could. He preferred bow hunting, closer, quieter, more personal. His compound bow, a Hoyt Carbon RX-3 equipped with Rage broadhead arrows, was tuned to perfection, and his pack was neatly organized down to the last wind checker bottle. Friends called him methodical, patient, the kind of guy who cleaned his gear twice and always left a detailed plan. That morning, he'd driven in before sunrise, parked off a remote fire road, and followed a game trail up through the pines. Around mid-morning, he caught sight of a large bull elk standing broadside near a grove of fir trees. The animal bugled once, turned, and paused just long enough. At 30 yards, Travis took the shot. The Rocky Mountain elk is the largest subspecies of elk in North America. Adult bulls regularly exceed 700 pounds, with racks spanning up to 4 feet wide and tines as long as knives. During the rut, they're high-strung and volatile, driven by instinct and surging testosterone. They'll battle rivals with brutal head-on charges, scatter branches in display of dominance, and when wounded, can enter a final adrenal frenzy that turns even the dying into a deadly force. While most hunters respect the possibility in theory, few ever see it up close. Travis was about to. Following best practice, Travis waited 45 minutes before trailing. The blood trail was steady, rich, and bright red, likely a lung shot. He moved carefully through the brush, stepping over deadfall and ducking beneath low boughs. After nearly 200 yards of tracking, he found the bull lying near a fallen pine, its body slumped sideways and eyes dull. Blood had pooled beneath the animal's chest and its ribcage no longer rose. Travis approached, slowly at first, then confidently. He knocked his bow, lowered it, and stepped into the clearing. He drew out his phone to take a picture. The elk exploded upward. It surged to its feet in a single staggering motion, shoulders heaving, head swinging wide. The first antler caught Travis across the thigh, carving a long gash and sending him sideways. He staggered off balance as the bull turned and charged again. This time it hit full force. One tine drove into his abdomen, another beneath the collarbone. He screamed as he was lifted backwards and slammed against a nearby pine. The bark cracked behind him. He tried to push the elk off, grabbing wildly at its shoulder, but the weight was overwhelming. The bull wasn't striking clean, it was thrashing. Its body spasmed with the last tremors of life, muscles surging, legs kicking up debris as it crushed Travis against the tree. Another jab drove a tine deeper, this time between ribs. Blood soaked his jacket and pooled at his boots. He gasped once, then again weaker. A final lurch from the elk sent him sideways, collapsing into the dirt. The bull staggered, took 2 steps, and collapsed 5 feet away. Both of them lay still. When Travis missed his scheduled check-in window that evening, a friend called the local sheriff's office. A search party formed at first light. His truck was found parked where he'd left it, untouched. Following faint boot tracks and drag marks through the brush, they found the clearing by mid-afternoon. Travis's body was pinned awkwardly against a tree, blood dried into the pine bark. The elk lay nearby, dead at last, its antlers still coated with gore. His bow was buried beneath snapped branches, his phone was found face up in the soil, camera still open but never used. The autopsy confirmed massive internal trauma. 2 of the antler wounds had been independently fatal. The elk had died of its own injuries shortly after the attack, its lungs flooded with blood. Rangers posted a safety notice later that week, reminding hunters, never assume a downed animal is dead, especially when the shot is borderline and the terrain gives it cover. Travis was buried the following Saturday in Bozeman. The service was small, the kind hunters attend in silence. His story didn't make headlines, but across the hunting community it traveled fast, quietly, urgently, like a warning in the woods. March 12, 2008 broke cool and still across the granite ridges of Matabo Hills in southern Zimbabwe. The sun was just beginning to warm the rock outcrops that jutted from the brush, ancient formations carved by time and wind into natural sentinels overlooking the valleys below. Baobab trees reached their twisted limbs skyward, and shadows lingered in the hollows where leopards liked to rest. This wasn't open savanna. It was closed country, tight, rocky, and perfect for ambush predators. And it was here that a 47-year-old man named Lennox Barad rose before dawn to prepare for the kind of hunt no one took lightly. Lennox had grown up in nearby Kezi, just east of the park boundary. He wasn't a trophy hunter nor a tourist. He was a seasoned bushman, a tracker, and a licensed hunter who often assisted the park's department when local wildlife grew too bold. Quiet and even-tempered, Lennox was well known in the region as a man who knew the land, and more importantly, the animals that lived on it. He'd hunted baboons that raided crops, warthogs that tore through fences, and on more than one occasion, problem leopards that had gotten too comfortable near the villages. His respect for the bush was hard-earned. He didn't brag, he didn't rush, but this time something had gone wrong. Over the past week, 3 goats had been taken from a small homestead just beyond the basalt ridge that separated the forest edge from cultivated fields. The signs were clear: claw marks, drag trails, and a half-eaten carcass left hanging in the fork of a tree. Only one animal did that. A call went out to Lennox. He arrived that afternoon with a small team. 2 junior trackers and a bolt-action Rigby rifle chambered in .275, ideal for the terrain. They set bait, mounted a hide, and waited. At dusk on the second day, movement stirred behind the thorn bush near the bait pile. Lennox raised the rifle and fired. The shot hit, but not cleanly. The leopard bolted into the rocks, a dark blur swallowed by stone and shadow. Blood drops dotted the trail. The trackers wanted to wait until morning, but Lennox insisted they follow. Time was critical. A wounded leopard didn't leave itself vulnerable, it doubled back, found cover, and waited. And when it struck, it didn't bluff, it went for the throat. The African leopard is not the largest of the big cats, but pound for pound, it's one of the most formidable. Adult males weigh between 130 and 200 pounds, but their muscular build allows them to haul prey twice their size into trees. Their retractable claws are razor sharp. Their bite force is nearly 700 psi, more than enough to sever tendons or crush windpipes. And unlike lions that often roar or posture before charging, leopards strike in silence. In rocky terrain like Matabo, they're nearly invisible until they move. Lennox followed the blood trail past a collapsed gully and into a thicket of jumbled rocks and scrub. The trail turned sharply up a slope where granite boulders stacked like stairs beneath a steep overhang. The cat was nowhere in sight. He stepped forward slowly, eye scanning the brush ahead. Behind him, the trackers fanned out in a cautious arc, rifles raised. No one saw what waited above. The leopard had doubled back and climbed into a ledge hidden by sun and shadow. It was bleeding heavily from the haunches, but alive, barely, and full of adrenaline. As Lennox passed beneath, it dropped. It landed hard, its full weight slamming into Lennox's back with the force of a dropped boulder. The leopard's jaws locked instantly onto the base of his neck, teeth diving into muscle and artery in one crushing bite. The two tumbled downslope in a chaotic blur of claws, dust, and broken bush. As they rolled, the impact cracked one of Lennox's ribs and drove the breath from his lungs. He hit the ground with a wet thud, stunned but conscious, and reached for his rifle with fingers already slick with blood. The barrel scraped rock as he tried to lift it, but the cat was already on top of him again. Its claws tore into his shoulder and raked down across his ribcage, leaving open flesh in their wake. Lennox kicked, twisted, fought, but his body was losing strength by the second. Blood pooled quickly in the dust beneath him, and the leopard, driven by pain and instinct, shook him once, twice, then let go. A shout rang out from the rocks above. The trackers, panicked and out of position, fired warning shots into the air to try and scare the cat. But it didn't bolt. It limped a few steps away, growled low and hoarse, and collapsed near the roots of a stone fig tree, its chest heaving with the final effort of a dying predator that had made sure not to die alone. The recovery was frantic and desperate. The trackers scrambled downslope through thorn and loose stone, rifles still raised as they approached the blood-darkened clearing. They reached Lennox within seconds, but the scene was already still. His eyes were glassy, his mouth slightly open, and his body limp against the dirt. One man pressed fingers to his neck and whispered something, but there was no pulse. The artery had been severed cleanly. Blood loss had been rapid and total, less than a minute, and nothing more could be done. There was no time for grief. The men moved quickly, wrapping Lennox's body in a canvas poncho and lashing together a makeshift litter of mopane branches to carry him down the ridge. The leopard's body was found a short distance away, already stiff, sprawled against the rocks in a final sprawl of exertion. Its original wound had torn through the hindquarters and bled it out slowly, but not before it had turned back for a last strike. The animal was photographed, tagged for official records, and retrieved later by wildlife authorities. In the weeks that followed, no mount was requested, no hide was displayed. Lennox's death was classified as a fatal wildlife incident, and the investigation confirmed everything had been done by the book. But policy changed. No more solo tracking within ambush terrain. No more pursuit of injured predators without perimeter control. His funeral was held 3 days later beneath the shade of a mopane tree near his family's home. Neighbors came in from across the district, many on foot, to pay their respects. No one spoke loudly, no one called it bad luck. They called it what it was: the price of underestimating an animal that had made silence its greatest weapon. For all his skill and experience, Lennox had made one critical mistake. He looked ahead but not above, and in that high country of rocks and dust, that was all it took. On a moonless night in February 2018, the South African bush lay in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional call of nocturnal creatures. Darkness enveloped the private game reserve near the edge of Kruger National Park, a sanctuary for wildlife and a dangerous frontier for those who sought to exploit it. Amid the shadows, 3 figures moved cautiously, their rifles slung across their backs, their movements deliberate. Among them was 50-year-old David Baloyi, a resident of Mavudza village in Mozambique. David's life, like many in his remote village, was one of hardship. Mavudza, situated in the Masengeri area, is a place of stark poverty where survival often depends on subsistence farming. Corn, cassava, peanuts, and rice grow in the sandy soils, yielding meager harvests. Most homes lack electricity, and opportunities for economic advancement are scarce. In a community where 3/4 of the population is illiterate, the illegal wildlife trade presents a tempting, albeit perilous, opportunity. David, like others before him, saw poaching as a way to provide for his family. The black market for animal products is lucrative. Rhino horn valued at more than gold, and lion bones sought after for traditional medicine and tiger wine in Asia fetch exorbitant prices. Though poachers only receive a fraction of the profits, the income can mean the difference between survival and starvation. David, along with 2 companions, crossed the border into South Africa, driven by desperation and the promise of easy money. Their destination was the Ubabat Game Reserve, a private sanctuary south of the Olifants River. The trio carried hunting rifles capable of taking down elephants, rhinos, or lions. With only basic butchery tools in tow, they planned to harvest whatever they could kill. But this wasn't their first foray into the bush. They knew the terrain and moved with confidence, avoiding flashlights to remain undetected by rangers. As the men crept through the dense undergrowth, they searched for signs of their prey. Stealth was essential, and their hearts pounded with the adrenaline of the hunt. The dry earth muffled their footsteps, but the sharp thorns of acacia trees scraped their arms as they pressed forward. The faint outline of tracks caught their attention, large paw prints in the dirt likely belonging to a lion. They whispered among themselves, crouching low as they examined the trail. But what they didn't realize was that something far deadlier was watching them. The African lion is a fearsome predator, responsible for hundreds of human fatalities each year. Males can grow up to 10 feet in length, including their tail, and weigh nearly 500 pounds. Their powerful jaws and sharp canines are designed to bring down prey much larger than themselves. While lions can hunt during the day, they are masters of the night. Their night vision is 6 to 8 times better than a human's, allowing them to stalk silently and strike with precision under the cover of darkness. As the poachers moved forward, they unknowingly ventured into the territory of a lion pride. The lions, perfectly attuned to the darkness, had the advantage. The men, blinded by the lack of moonlight, stumbled into a deadly trap. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. David let out a cry as a lioness struck him from the shadows, knocking him to the ground with immense force. His rifle discharged, the gunshot sounding through the bush. The lioness's powerful jaws clamped around his skull, her sharp canines puncturing bone. David screamed, thrashing and kicking as he tried to free himself. The two other men, paralyzed with fear, watched in horror as more lions emerged from the darkness, their golden eyes glowing menacingly. Panic overtook them. Dropping their weapons, they turned and ran, their hearts pounding as they fled through the bush. The sounds of David's cries and the growls of the lions faded behind them as they crashed through the undergrowth. Their flight was chaotic. They tripped over roots, tore through thorny branches, and didn't stop until they reached the perimeter fence. Only after scrambling to the other side did they pause to catch their breath. Their survival instincts had overridden everything else, leaving David behind to face the pride alone. Fearing legal consequences and the shoot-to-kill policies enforced by rangers, the two men chose not to seek help, knowing their actions could lead to severe punishment. Back at the scene, the lions continued their attack. For David, there was no escape. Asphyxiation and draining prey of its blood are the primary ways lions subdue their prey, and David was no exception. Within minutes, the predators had overpowered him. The pride fed in silence, their powerful jaws tearing through flesh and bone. The gunshot had alerted rangers who arrived at the scene hours later. What they found was gruesome. David's body had been almost entirely consumed, leaving only his head and scattered remains. Blood stained the ground where the lions had dragged their prey. Nearby, the abandoned rifles and ammunition confirmed the poachers' intent. Tracks in the dirt told the rest of the story. Two sets of footprints leading away from the scene, heading back toward the border. David's remains were transported to Maputha Malachi Hospital mortuary. His sister-in-law, who lived in South Africa, was called upon to formally identify him. The sight was devastating, and the trauma of that moment would stay with her forever. Back in Mozambique, David's family grieved his loss. For them, his death was a tragic consequence of poverty and desperation. The incident showed the deadly risks of poaching, not just from armed rangers, but from the animals themselves. Lions, despite being heavily poached for their bones, remain powerful predators capable of turning the tables on those who seek to exploit them. Conservationists and anti-poaching units pointed to the event as a gruesome reminder of the dangers posed by the illegal wildlife trade. On the night of April 1, 2019, under the silver glow of a full moon, 4 men quietly made their way through the rugged undergrowth of South Africa's Kruger National Park. They were poachers, their objective as deadly as it was lucrative: to hunt a white rhinoceros. This endeavor promised immense profit as the illicit trade in rhino horn continues to fetch astronomical sums on the black market, particularly in Asia, where it is falsely believed to possess medicinal properties. Armed with hunting rifles and a sense of desperation, they slipped past the park's boundaries, unaware that their mission would soon take a gruesome turn. Malusi, the youngest of the group, was no stranger to these dangerous expeditions. The temptation of wealth and the lack of legitimate opportunities in his impoverished community had driven him to this life. Despite knowing the risks, armed rangers, wild animals, and the unforgiving terrain, he had taken the chance yet again. That night, as they crouched under acacia trees and strained their ears for the sounds of rhinos, the stillness of the bush was both their ally and their greatest threat. The group crossed through the park's boundary fence with precision, carefully cutting a hole just big enough to crawl through. They marked the entry point with a rock, ensuring they could find their way back. As they ventured deeper into the wilderness, the night came alive with the chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of unseen animals. Their senses were heightened, and every movement was deliberate. The men knew that rangers patrolled the area heavily, and any slip-up could mean imprisonment or worse. As they pressed on, Malusi noticed something in the dirt. Kneeling, he examined a large pile of fresh rhino dung. He whispered to his companions, pointing out the moist consistency that indicated the animal wasn't far. The group turned off their flashlights, following the faint trail of footprints illuminated by the moonlight. Anticipation built as the tracks led them closer to their quarry. The prospect of a successful hunt pushed them forward, their breaths quickening with each step. Then, just ahead, they spotted their target. A massive white rhino stood grazing in a clearing, its broad silhouette almost luminous in the moonlight. The creature was a majestic sight, standing 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing over 4,000 pounds. Its long, curved horn gleamed, a prize worth more than gold. Malusi raised his rifle, steadying his aim. His finger hovered over the trigger. But before he could fire, a deafening trumpet shattered the quiet. The men froze as the ground trembled beneath them. From the shadows emerged a massive bull elephant, its ears flared and trunk raised in aggression. The elephant had been watching the intruders, its protective instincts triggered by their presence. With no warning, it charged. The poachers scattered, dropping their weapons as they fled. Malusi, intent on the rhino, was slow to react. By the time he turned, the elephant was upon him. It barreled into him with the force of a freight train, sending him flying through the air. He landed hard, his body crumpling on the unforgiving ground. Before he could process what had happened, the elephant charged again, its colossal foot coming down on his chest. The sickening sound of bones breaking echoed through the clearing as Malusi's screams pierced the night. The other poachers watched in horror from the safety of the bushes. They could see their companion lying motionless, the elephant looming over him. The massive animal shook its head, flapping its ears, and then retreated into the darkness. For a moment there was silence, broken only by Malusi's faint, labored breaths. The man emerged cautiously and rushed to his side. Malusi was alive, but barely. His breathing was shallow, each breath a painful struggle. His chest was visibly crushed, his ribs shattered. Knowing they couldn't leave him there, the group hoisted him up and began the arduous journey back. But in their panic, they lost their bearings. The dense bush, now a maze of shadows, offered no clear path. After what felt like hours of stumbling through the wilderness, they finally reached one of Kruger's tar roads. Exhausted and fearing capture by rangers, the men made a devastating decision. They left Malusi on the roadside and fled into the night. Alone and broken, Malusi lay under the moonlight, his wheezing breaths the only sound in the still air. The wilderness, however, is rarely silent for long. Predators lurk in the shadows, their sharp senses attuned to the faintest sign of weakness. As Malusi drifted in and out of consciousness, the cricket's chorus was interrupted by something far more sinister. The rustling of grass, the snap of a twig, unseen eyes glinted in the dark. A lion pride had caught Malusi's scent. Drawn by the blood and sound of his labored breathing, they crept closer, their padded feet silent against the earth. The first lioness approached cautiously, her golden eyes fixed on the helpless man. In an instant, she lunged, her powerful body pinning him down as her jaws closed around his throat. Malusi's struggle ceased as the pride descended upon him, their hunger overriding any hesitation. By morning, rangers were alerted to the incident when Malusi's accomplices contacted his family, relaying the news of the attack. A search party was dispatched, led by Regional Ranger Don English. Over the course of 3 days, the team scoured the area hoping to recover Malusi's remains. Eventually, they made a grim discovery near Crocodile Bridge. All that was left of him was a skull and a pair of torn trousers, his body completely devoured by the lions. Nearby, the rangers found discarded hunting rifles and ammunition, clear evidence of the group's intentions. The surviving poachers were later arrested and charged with illegal possession of firearms, conspiracy to poach, and trespassing. Their capture shed light on the harsh realities of poaching, where greed collides with unpredictable forces, leaving devastation in its wake. On the morning of March 23, 2024, the sun had just begun to cast its golden light over the snow-covered woods of Georgetown, California. The air was crisp and the silence of the wilderness wrapped around two brothers as they made their way deeper into the forest. Talon and Wyatt Brooks were no strangers to these woods, having spent countless hours hunting and camping here since they were children. Their father, a seasoned outdoorsman, had taught them not only how to track and hunt, but also how to survive in the wild, lessons that had shaped them into skilled hunters. That morning, the brothers set out on an expedition to collect shed antlers and hunt wild boar, a task they looked forward to each year. It was early spring, and while the land was still cloaked in snow, the boars were plentiful, and the antlers lay scattered among the trees. With their backpacks filled with supplies and a bond that only years of shared brotherly experiences could create, they ventured into the wilderness, unaware of the danger that lay ahead. The campsite they chose was familiar, tucked away just off the road where they could camp under the thick canopy of pine trees. They spent the afternoon setting up their camp, joking and laughing as they prepared for a quiet night under the stars. Dinner was a simple affair, cooked over an open flame with enough food to last them through the night. Though their father wasn't with them on this trip, the brothers were more than capable of handling themselves. It wasn't the first time they had ventured out alone. After eating, the brothers set out to hunt, knowing that the boars would be active as the sun began to set. Within a couple of hours, they had successfully downed one boar and found a few prime antlers to collect. They spent the rest of the afternoon dressing the boar and hauling it back to camp. Unbeknownst to the brothers, the smell of the hunt, a mix of fresh meat and blood, carried through the forest, leaving an open invitation to any predators in the area. As the night fell, the brothers cleaned up at a nearby stream, then retired to their tent to sleep, unaware that the aftermath of their hunt had drawn the attention of a hungry cougar. The beast had been prowling the area, its sharp eyes catching the scent of the carcass. It had waited until darkness settled, slipping into the shadows near the camp. The faint sounds of the brothers' voices and the warmth of the fire were enough to make the cat hesitant, but the hunger gnawing at its belly urged it forward. The cougar had lingered in the woods all night, watching the camp from a distance, its instincts driving it closer and closer to the prize. But when Wyatt stepped out of the tent in the early morning to relieve himself, the predator saw its chance. Stealthily, it crept through the underbrush, closing in on the unsuspecting brothers. Talon and Wyatt had no idea they were being stalked. As they made their way back toward the woods, the cougar remained silent, moving stealthily in the shadows. The brothers, focused on the path ahead, noticed nothing unusual. But then, in a split second, the cougar leapt from its hiding place, its powerful body crashing into Wyatt. With deadly precision, it raked its claws across his face, leaving deep gashes that tore through flesh and bone. Wyatt screamed in pain, but before he could react, the cougar was on top of him, its teeth sinking into his cheek and neck. Talon, who had been just a step ahead, rushed to his brother's aid. He threw down his rifle and, with the strength of desperation, lunged at the beast. His body collided with the cougar, knocking it off his brother and sending it tumbling through the air. In the chaos, Talon shouted at Wyatt to run. Blood poured from his brother's face, and his left eye was all but lost. Stumbling, disoriented, and half blind, Wyatt ran for the camp, leaving a trail of blood in the snow behind him. In his panic, he managed to grab a phone and dial 911. though his hands were slick with his own blood and his vision blurred. Talon fought with the mountain lion, trying to keep it away from his brother, but his efforts were in vain. The cougar, furious and afraid, attacked again, its claws slicing through his body with terrifying force. Talon's cries filled the air as he tried to fight back, but the lion's grip was relentless. Within moments, Talon was on the ground, unable to protect himself from the creature's savage assault. The lion tore into his throat, silencing him forever. Wyatt reached the camp, finally managing to speak to the 911 operator before he passed out from shock and blood loss. The paramedics arrived moments later, but it was too late for Talon. They found him just a few feet from the camp, his body mangled beyond recognition. The cougar had been standing over him, feasting on its prey when the officers arrived. They fired their shots, driving the lion back into the trees, but it was clear that Talon was already gone. The cougar was eventually tracked down and euthanized. Its stomach revealed the horrifying signs of its predation, with blood still fresh on its muzzle. Wyatt, though gravely injured, was rushed to the hospital. The surgeons worked to save what they could of his face, though his injuries were severe. Wyatt was expected to recover, though his appearance would forever be altered by the brutal attack. In May 2011, the rugged wilderness of Alaska's Seaward Peninsula, with its snow-capped peaks, dense forests, and vast untouched landscapes, became the backdrop for a haunting ordeal. The remote region, known for its fierce weather and dangerous wildlife, is home to powerful predators like the grizzly bear, a force of nature in its own right. 54-year-old Wes Perkins, a seasoned outdoorsman and a former fire chief from Nome, Alaska, had spent decades navigating these wild terrains. But on this particular hunt, the wilderness would challenge him in ways he had never imagined, thrusting him into a life-or-death struggle with one of nature's most formidable creatures. Wes was joined by his close friends Dan and Edward Stang for a spring bear hunting trip. The group had tracked a large male grizzly bear across the snow-covered landscape, eager for a successful hunt. They had traveled to the secluded wilderness with snowmobiles, which were essential to covering the vast distances between tracks. The bear they were tracking was massive and had just emerged from hibernation. The men had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but they could have never imagined how their hunt would take a deadly turn. After several hours of following the bear's tracks through the snow, the men reached a point where the trail seemed to vanish. The bear had disappeared and the snow was undisturbed in the area. The trio began to fan out, searching for any clue that would lead them to the elusive predator. Wes, eager to find the bear, ventured further away from the group. He moved ahead, unknowingly stepping closer to the very danger he had been tracking, the weight of his steps unnoticed by the creature watching from the shadows. What Wes didn't know was that the grizzly bear had already spotted the group. The bear, a terrifying predator weighing over 1,000 pounds, was lying in wait, its sharp eyes following every move the hunters made. Grizzly bears are super predators, and this one, hungry after a long hibernation, was ready to strike. Wes had unknowingly ventured too close to its territory, and the bear was ready to defend it. Wes took a few more steps when he suddenly felt the ground tremble. The massive grizzly charged, emerging from its hidden position with terrifying speed. The bear moved faster than Wes could react, and in seconds it was on him. The first blow sent Wes sprawling to the ground, and before he could lift his rifle, the bear grabbed him by the head. The grizzly's powerful jaws closed around Wes's skull, and its claws tore into his body as it began to shake him like a rag doll. The pain was immediate and unbearable. Wes screamed, but the bear's grip was unrelenting. In a flash of horror, Wes realized he was fighting for his life. His companions, hearing the commotion, rushed to help, but what they saw as they approached was a nightmare come to life. The bear's claws and teeth were embedded in Wes's body, and the violent shaking was tearing him apart. Dan and Edward fired their rifles at the bear, trying to stop the attack, but the bear's immense strength made it nearly impossible to land a clean shot. The grizzly continued its assault, unaware of the gunfire around it. The men, desperate to save their friend, continued to fire until one shot landed and finally made the bear release Wes. The grizzly let out a roar of pain before retreating into the dense brush, leaving behind a bloodied Wes lying in the snow. The scene was chaos. Wes's face was unrecognizable, his skull shattered, his jaw broken, and blood pouring from his wounds. His eyes were swollen shut and his breath came in shallow, labored gasps. Dan and Edward, stunned and terrified, rushed to his side with no idea whether he was alive or dead. They knew they had to act quickly, but they were paralyzed by the horror of the situation. Wes, barely conscious, used all of his strength to survive. The pain was immense, but his survival instincts kicked in. He struggled to breathe, each gasp more difficult than the last. His jaw had been torn from his face, his nose was gone, and his skull had been cracked under the force of the bear's attack. But despite everything, Wes fought to stay conscious. Wes struggled to breathe, his body unable to move properly. Blood poured from his wounds and his face was unrecognizable. But he fought to stay conscious, knowing his survival depended on it. Dan and Edward worked to stabilize him as best they could, applying pressure to his wounds and trying to keep him awake. They knew they needed to get help, but they were in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, miles away from civilization. They radioed for assistance, but the closest rescue teams were hours away. Time was running out for Wes. After what seemed like an eternity, the helicopter arrived to airlift Wes to safety. His friends helped him into the aircraft, and Wes was flown to the nearest hospital, where he was immediately placed into a medically induced coma. He underwent 26 life-saving surgeries over the next several months, the first of which was to reconstruct his shattered face. The doctors used titanium plates to rebuild his jaw, and Wes spent months recovering in the hospital, unable to speak or even eat solid food. The recovery was grueling. Wes's injuries were so severe that he had to relearn many basic functions, including how to speak, eat, and even breathe properly. The damage to his face was permanent, but he fought through the pain, determined to recover. After months of rehabilitation, Wes was finally able to leave the hospital, but his life would never be the same. Wes's survival story is nothing short of miraculous. Despite the horrific injuries he sustained, he continues to live an active life. He has shared his experience with others, warning of the unpredictable dangers that lurk in the wild. Wes's story is a witness of human resilience, showing that even in the face of unimaginable pain, the will to survive can overcome the odds. Though he can no longer hunt as he once did, Wes is not bitter. He holds no ill will toward the bear that nearly took his life. Instead, he speaks with quiet wisdom about the need for respect when interacting with wildlife. The bear did what it had to do to survive, just as Wes did.
Thank you for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.